Tonight, Australia's inflation shock as the cost of living soars to a 20-year high. Home buyers told to prepare for an interest rate hit. A grim find sparks a murder probe in Melbourne's West. The hunt for footy thugs involved in a VIP attack at the MCG. A great-grandfather facing jail after opening fire in a rubbish dumping feud. Schools bracing for a teacher crunch, hundreds banned from the classroom. And the Demons cop a COVID hit, Simon Goodwin and players sidelined.
Live from Melbourne, 7 News with Peter Mitchell starts now.
Good evening. The cost of living has surged to its highest level in 20 years, with inflation coming in at 5%, much higher than expected. The bad news means the Reserve Bank is now under growing pressure to lift interest rates, possibly as early as next week.
At 11:30 a.m, what politicians, economists and consumers were sweating on.
In breaking news, Australia's inflation rate has risen.
Risen as expected, but not by this much. Headline inflation up 2.1% for the quarter, 5.1% for the year. The biggest surge since 2001 in the wake of the GST launch.
These numbers are certainly very bad. They're far higher than most economists had been expecting. They're way higher than what the Reserve Bank was expecting.
The biggest contributor, transport, mostly fuel, up 13.7% in the year, but also housing, up 6.7%, household goods and services up 4.9%, and education costs up 4.7%.
Even the prices of pets and pet products were up nearly 7%.
But food and groceries soared. At food services company Interfood, today's numbers didn't surprise. Example, bok choy was $1 a bunch in January.
All of a sudden, with all this rain, we're paying up to $3 a bunch.
$3. Rowan Byrne says the floods spiked prices instantly. But in his 25 years with the company, he's not seen anything like the impact COVID has had on global supply lines.
And it's painful, isn't it?
It is painful.
Transport, freight, labour, fertilisers up fourfold. Even the wood needed for pallets is in short supply.
Demand has taken off far, far quicker than the supply chain will ever be able to handle.
The issue now, how to bring that inflation under control. The Reserve Bank's weapon of choice, interest rate hikes, something they wouldn't normally do during an election campaign. However,
I think they need to move fast. The situation has changed.
The first hike possibly next Tuesday to at least 0.25%, hitting 2% next year.
I would expect another 2 to 3 rate rises this year and another 2 to 3 rate rises next year as well.
If that was passed on in full, it's more than $500 a month extra on a $500,000 mortgage.
Economists say it's difficult to forecast where the inflation numbers will head next, but fruit and veg experts like this company are confident they'll get over the effects of the floods within months, but they can't predict what will happen globally.
Markets hit again overnight with news China was sending more cities into COVID lockdown, forcing factories to close, supply to slow again. While Ukraine's war plays havoc with international oil prices, all sending world inflation rates up at a pace without modern precedent. Chris Reason, 7 News.
And Scott Morrison is blaming the inflation spike on those global supply chain problems. The shock cost of living figures were revealed as millions of Australians pocketed one-off cash bonuses just weeks before they head to the polls.
Scott Morrison places himself in graphic danger.
Who has been able to keep inflation lower than all the advanced economies of the world?
Accurate at that point.
This is the expectation on inflation. The markets are estimating it at about 4.5% in Australia.
But just over an hour later, the inflation figure deflates his defence. 5.1% off the charts.
This bloke is so out of touch you'd need the Hubble telescope to find him.
Labor pulling out its own graph showing the soaring cost of living.
On Scott Morrison's watch, prices are going through the roof.
Later, facing the real prospect of a pre-election interest rate rise from the Reserve Bank next Tuesday, which would be the first during a campaign since the 2007 election John Howard lost.
Interest rates, from memory, were around about 6.4%. That was the cash rate. Cash rate now is 0.1%. We had an independent Reserve Bank.
A decision that might impact the votes of homeowners young and old.
That's why we've delivered the cost of living relief now.
The promised $250 cash payment going into the bank accounts of pensioners, carers, the unemployed, veterans and concession card holders from today. The $250 will be a big help to these pensioners in the short term, but Scott Morrison hopes the warm glow of that money follows them to the ballot box in 3.5 weeks.
Australians need more than just a one-off payment for one more vote.
Mr Morrison countering that Labor leader Anthony Albanese is trying to buy votes with a promise to increase wages.
It is a con. He's running around telling everybody he can lift their wages. He can't do that.
As the Prime Minister confronts trouble on another policy front.
We're in the middle of an election campaign and you've got the government at war with itself over climate change.
Outspoken Queenslander Matt Canavan declaring this about the government's net zero emissions target.
Net zero is dead.
That's not his party's position, that's not the coalition's position, and it's not the government's position.
Senator Canavan's Queensland LNP colleague Michelle Landry putting it more bluntly.
Pull your head in, Matt.
Matt didn't, keeping his head up and out.
I'm good friends with Michelle, but sometimes we have disagreements. We can still have a drink at the end of the day.
Though his leader is sticking to the script.
We've made an agreement. We're going to honour that agreement.
Agreeing that some will disagree. Mark Riley, 7 News.
A man is being questioned as we go to air tonight over the death of a 60-year-old man in Melbourne's West. The victim's body was found in his home after an early morning fight.
Distressed in the back of a divvy van, this man is accused of killing his housemate. The 10-hour hunt for the suspect ended in a Seddon laneway.
I saw a man getting arrested. There was about a dozen police around. He was standing there, he was quite calm.
A local resident tipped police off after seeing a man acting suspiciously inside this car, leading heavily armed officers to swoop.
I just walked out here to walk the dog and all of this is taking place.
Hours earlier, the 45-year-old allegedly stabbed his 60-year-old housemate during an argument before fleeing their Brooklyn home. The victim's other housemate made the gruesome discovery at 3:30 this morning.
There was a police car and a police officer speaking to a guy who seemed pretty depressed. He was sitting in the gutter. You know, you fear for the safety of your family and stuff, but that's about it.
The neighbourhood transforming into a crime scene as forensic officers uncovered clues and searched for answers in a crime that's shaken a community.
I got a shock when I came down, that's for sure. I feel sorry for whoever lost their life.
And Cassie Zervos joins us now with the latest. Cassie, have any charges been laid?
Not yet, Mitch. The 45-year-old Seddon man has now been in custody for more than 4 hours, but the interview process could go long into the night, and that's for a number of reasons, including the state of his health. The 45-year-old man remains here in custody tonight, being questioned by homicide detectives, but what the dispute was over is still unknown. Mitch.
Cassie Zervos at police headquarters, thank you. And police are hunting for 2 thugs wanted over an MCG bashing that's left a 54-year-old in hospital. Paul Dowsley has the latest this evening, and Paul, he has been discharged.
He has, Mitch. I've spoken with him this afternoon and he's reasonably optimistic about his injuries, says it could have been a lot worse, but he has some terrible bruising and swelling. He needed stitches in those facial wounds that he suffered, and it's believed the police tonight are closing in on those responsible. It's understood they know exactly who these attackers are. They were all enjoying lunch in the Olympic room there at the MCG on Monday in the Essendon game there for the President's Lunch, the Essendon President's Lunch. They bought their way in for $750 a ticket. Now, a younger man used offensive language about a player during the game. The victim took issue with that, but he told me that it turned violent when he went to the bathroom and there was another separate dispute there with 2 young men about vaping, and the victim was viciously attacked and left bloodied and bashed, and the thugs were gone when police arrived. Now, Essendon has given detectives a list of the full guest list, the layout of who was on what table, and what will help detectives even more, Mitch, is that the MCG has CCTV cameras not just in that room but in the full precinct to see where they went.
Paul Dowsley in the city, thank you. International streaming giants are making a big play for the AFL broadcast rights. Gillan McLachlan is already holding talks in the US to lock up a deal as fans call for as many free-to-air games as possible.
We've seen our game on 7, 9, 10, Fox and Kayo. Could Amazon, Apple or Paramount join the team? The AFL wants more money and a bigger audience from any new deal.
Including free-to-air and a streaming service in the rights would no doubt put it in front of a lot more eyeballs.
And those eyeballs belong to fans, who also have demands.
To have as much free-to-air games as possible.
And they say to keep streaming costs down. But when rights cost up to $600 million a year, money has to come from somewhere.
Introducing Friday Night Baseball on Apple TV+.
2 Major League Baseball matches in the States each week are exclusive to Apple's subscription service.
We are trailing behind other countries, especially the US.
Channel 7 and Foxtel have the current AFL rights until the end of 2024. From 7, we're a proud Australian company that's been through a lot with the AFL. We are in discussions about an extension. Paramount, the owner of 10, says the Australian media landscape has changed considerably since the last footy deal, claiming it is perfectly poised to bid for broadcast rights for AFL.
The legend becomes immortal.
The current rights don't expire for 2.5 years, but there is internal pressure at the AFL to sign a deal. Gil McLachlan says he wants this to be his final big achievement before stepping down. Which means his current trip to the US to meet broadcast executives could change the way we all watch footy. Blake Johnson, 7 News.
The future for a frail great-grandfather is in the hands of a judge after he confessed to shooting a man in a dispute over rubbish dumping. The 90-year-old was captured on security camera as he pursued his victim with a walking stick and a gun.
At 90 years old, Paolo Minichi moves slowly, but that didn't stop the great-grandfather from firing a handgun when a business deal turned sour. CCTV shows him calmly remove the loaded weapon from his pocket before 2 shots ring out. During a scuffle off camera, the victim, Raymond Pascoe, seen later talking on his mobile phone, was shot in the arm.
Are you worried about going to jail?
I don't worry about nothing, no.
2 years ago, Mr Minichi paid Mr Pascoe to clean up his Ravenhall scrapyard. He paid for 2/3 of the cost up front, but he refused to finalise the bill. The dispute escalated when Mr Pascoe returned to dump rubbish out of spite. Mr Minichi pleaded guilty to possessing the unregistered firearm and conduct endangering life. The victim told the court the shooting had ruined his life. When I close my eyes, all I can see is the barrel of the gun staring back at me. All I can hear is the echoing of gunshots in my ears. Mr Minichi's barrister told the judge his client has no criminal history and is remorseful. He also provided the court with 52 character references. The judge will consider whether Mr Minichi should receive a community corrections order or go to prison. He'll be sentenced tomorrow. Emma O'Sullivan, 7 News.
Australia has ramped up support for Ukraine, flying artillery into the war zone. It comes as the US Defence Secretary told the world Ukraine can defeat the Russians.
Australian firepower to help fight Russia in Ukraine. 6 howitzers and ammunition being flown into battle, part of Australia's $225 million contribution to the war effort.
Australia is right out there on the leading edge in standing with people of Ukraine.
Australia also at a meeting of 40 countries in Germany helping coordinate the West's response.
Ukraine clearly believes that it can win, and so does everyone here.
In Moscow, Vladimir Putin ramped up his propaganda, meeting the United Nations Secretary General, insisting this isn't war, but Russia responding to calls for help to save people in Ukraine's east. After 2 months of fighting, Mariupol's mayor says they found evidence of a third mass grave. In Bucha, new rows at the cemetery, a month since his town was liberated, the funerals haven't stopped. The owners of what was a luxury penthouse here in Irpin on the outskirts of the capital left their home in the opening days of this conflict fearing exactly this, an artillery strike. The Russians were coming from Bucha, which you can see through what is now essentially a window. The damage here is astonishing. Of the 1,200 or so people who lived in this building before the war, just 70 have returned home, including Oleg, one floor down. He fled in February with his wife and 3-year-old son.
The bombs were started bombing.
Returning alone, there's still no heating or power here and a lingering unease.
The result of some part of
shrapnel. But in a symbol of defiance today, the destruction of Ukraine's friendship statue installed 40 years ago as a sign of brotherhood with Russia. The designer saying while there is Putin, there can be no friendship. In Ukraine, Cyril Greenoge, 7 News.
Back home, the jobs of hundreds of Victorian teachers are hanging in the balance after they fail to meet vaccination requirements. They're banned from classrooms under COVID rules, but there are calls to scrap the mandate to avoid a teacher crunch.
Vaccine mandates are still in force, and that means come tomorrow, up to 420 teachers could be out of work.
There is a very small number of teachers who are not part of that 99.2%, but it is a very, very clear sign that teachers, like so many people in the Victorian community, are doing their bit.
180 teachers remain entirely unvaccinated. 240 haven't had their third dose, which was due on March 25.
It's time that the mandates in schools ended. It's time we got everyone back to work.
Staff who haven't met the vaccine requirements have been placed on leave. The April 28 deadline marks the beginning of those teachers being considered unauthorised absentees.
It's time our kids had proper learning at school and we just focused on keeping them at school and teachers in work.
When asked if double vaccinated teachers would be allowed back into classrooms to help increase staff numbers, the state government said given all absences were being adequately covered, they wouldn't consider that move at this time.
Being vaccinated, being in this case triple vaccinated, is a really important way of keeping the virus away from yourself, but also keeping schools safe.
Chanel Vella, 7 News.
A northern suburbs man has received the shock of his life after being told his lotto win was a lot bigger than he believed. He bought his winning ticket from the Tullamarine news agency. He went to bed thinking he won $1 million, but it was actually $20 million. The renter intends to buy a home, travel Australia and help out his family. Good luck to you. The reigning premiers are being rocked by a growing COVID outbreak. Tim Watson, the D's will be missing key personnel against the Hawks.
Mitch, their cluster in isolation has grown. Chief football reporter Tom Brown has the details. And Tom, first the coach and now a few premiership players.
Tim, the coach, Simon Goodwin, and 3 players, superstar Luke Jackson, Keziah Pickett and Tom Sparrow, all have COVID, are in isolation and won't be available to take on Hawthorn. Adam Uze will coach the group. They do get back 2 stars from COVID, Jack Viney and Jake Lever. The broader question tonight, whether this outbreak amongst Melbourne will spread within the group. It's interesting, Pickett and Jackson are housemates. They live with Toby Bedford, who is negative but trained, I understand, with the group today. They're following all the protocols, Tim.
Thanks, Tom. Also ahead in sport, the Tigers make a call on Dusty and a trip to Perth. We're live to Richmond for the latest. The bombshell move that's caused a stir between 2 fierce rivals, and Mitchell Youngstar explodes in the NBA playoffs. And we may have just found the coolest sporting dad.
Oh, OK.
You got a nomination, but it's not you.
OK, thank you, Tim. I'll look forward to that a bit later on. A driver could escape jail time over the tragic death of a little schoolboy in Melbourne's east. The details are next on 7 News. Also, why our children are being caught in a mathematics slump. A tragedy on the roads in Melbourne's northern suburbs. Ed Sheeran and Sir Cliff Richard lining up for a royal celebration. And later, interest rates under pressure. The experts outline your options. A motorbike rider has been killed after being hit by a van in Melbourne's north. The collision happened on Edgars Road at Thomastown at 9:30 this morning. The 22-year-old driver of the van stopped and is being questioned by police. and they hope other motorists have dash cam that shows what happened. A driver who ran a red light and fatally struck a 10-year-old boy could escape jail time. A court heard the child was killed in front of his sister while they walked home from the shops.
10-year-old Jack Power was mowed down while using a pedestrian crossing in Blackburn North. The grade 5 student was walking back from the supermarket with his 6-year-old sister and a family friend when Zhao Lu failed to stop at a red light because he wasn't paying attention. Mr. Lu has pleaded guilty to dangerous driving causing Jack's death in August 2018. That has left a family heartbroken, robbed of opportunity to watch the caring, happy boy grow up. His mum saying in a victim impact statement, "Nobody understands the extent of the suffering and I would rather stay at home than face the world." And of his sister, "I know she will spend a lifetime coming to terms with the fact she watched her brother die." His grandfather adding, "Nothing is worse than having a beautiful little life taken away because of stupidity and neglect." The court heard Mr. Lu suffered from PTSD after that night and still battles with anxiety. Every year on the anniversary of Jack's death, he makes an offering of flowers and performs spiritual rituals to express his regret. Mr. Lu will now be assessed for a community corrections order. If imposed, he'll spend no time behind bars. Sarah Jones, 7 News.
Sir Cliff Richard and Ed Sheeran will headline a people's pageant to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. They'll be part of a procession through London that will follow the path Her Majesty made to her coronation 7 decades ago.
Outside Buckingham Palace, they're getting ready. Scaffolding slowly covering the Queen Victoria Memorial, preparing for a big party and a pageant down the Mall. They've been rehearsing in an aircraft hangar. The high-vis vests will be replaced by costumes.
A 70-year celebration just doesn't come around, well, any time. We haven't had one in history, so we want it to be big. We want it to be the biggest, the most magnificent, the most wonderful event.
It'll include Ed Sheeran and Sir Cliff Richard to help celebrate Her Majesty's 70 years on the throne. They'll be among a diverse 10,000-strong cast, showing how Britain and the Commonwealth have changed.
We've shown how the country's evolved. There's so many differences now than there was in the 1950s, but there's such a power and a strength in our differences.
Broadcast to an expected global TV audience in the hundreds of millions. Britons will get an extra public holiday and longer pub opening hours to celebrate the Jubilee. There are even calls for a permanent annual 4-day weekend to mark the Queen's lifetime of service. For many, it would be a fitting tribute. In London, Hugh Whitfield, 7 News.
Australia's reputation as the clever country is at risk as maths enrolments fall to unprecedented lows. It found fewer than 10% of Year 12 students are studying the highest level of mathematics. Experts say better quality teachers are needed to foster interest in the subject. Jane Bunn joins us now. And Jane, is there more cloud tomorrow?
Mitch, there is indeed, but it'll clear to humid and warm sunshine to end the week. The cloud made this morning's sunrise stunning and meant the run of cold nights is over. The day was quite grey, but winds are light, barely a ripple out there on the bay. The northeasterly wind direction let it reach 22. The late afternoon brought pockets of sunshine, and after more cloud tomorrow, on Friday, there should be lots of that sun. It'll come with high humidity too. The full details are after sport, Mitch.
Thank you, Jane. We'll see you then. There's good news for commuters in Melbourne's southeast. Rochelle Brown has the details.
Mitch, it's been a long time coming, but the wait is finally over. I'll have the latest live from the Monash next on 7 News.
Also coming up, how police stopped a murder plot from being carried out last weekend. The moment a truck lost control in a terrifying head-on smash. And a cruise ship coup as a luxury liner prepares to make Melbourne home. Police have revealed they foiled a murder plot last weekend. Blake Johnson has the details. And Blake, this led to arrests and raids across Melbourne.
Peter, there were arrests in Point Cook, Greenvale and Gladstone Park, and even one inside Barwon Jail. That arrest was of George Moroggi, who we told you about last night. Police claim he was the driving force behind the plan to kill two people outside jail. Officers tell us they came across the murder plot Friday after tapping the phone of Mr Moroggi's girlfriend. They rounded up her and two other suspects on Saturday, stopping two murders they claim were just hours from happening.
We believed that they were to be carried out last weekend. In fact, the assailants were given a deadline by Sunday evening.
The reason for the attempted murders? A turf war between crime gangs. Peter?
Blake Johnson in the newsroom, thank you. Congestion on the Monash Freeway is set to ease this weekend with more lanes finally opening up. Rochelle Brown is over the Monash this evening and Rochelle, this has been a long time coming for frustrated drivers.
Mitch, this is the first sign of relief for drivers after months of delays in terms of the crews. They will start to remove the barriers from Thursday night between Eastlink and Springvale Road, giving drivers access to new lanes from Friday morning and throughout the weekend. Despite that release, there will still be major disruptions for motorists over the coming months, largely at night as resurfacing works continue. Construction is expected to wind down by the middle of the year. Mitch?
Rochelle Brown over the Monash, thank you. Domestic violence charges against cricket great Michael Slater have been dismissed on mental health grounds. The 52-year-old was detained last night and taken to a facility for treatment. The former Test batsman has been diagnosed with a major depressive disorder, alcohol addiction, borderline personality disorder and ADHD. Charges of stalking and harassing his ex-partner will now be dealt with under the Mental Health Act. Confronting dashcam video has emerged of a head-on smash in Queensland. The B-double lost control south of Brisbane, leaving the SUV driver with nowhere to go. Video posted to the dashcam Facebook group shows the truck's trailer sideswiping the car last August. The SUV driver had to be cut free and suffered serious back and neck injuries. A luxury new cruise ship will be based in Melbourne in a boost to the industry just recovering after a 2-year pandemic shutdown. The Virgin Voyages liner will be able to carry nearly 3,000 passengers.
A tantalising offering from Virgin's Richard Branson, a luxury child-free cruise holiday.
We're the hot new happening product in the cruise industry.
An industry coming back to life after being shut down for 2 years. And it's a coup for Melbourne. The resilient lady will set up home here for 4 months from December next year, exploring the East Coast and Tasmania and across the Tasman to New Zealand. Just last week, the first international cruise ship returned to Australian waters.
I absolutely think that cruise demand will return. It's going to take some time though, like most parts of the tourism industry.
Before the pandemic, 350 cruise ships travelled to Australia each year, supporting more than 18,000 jobs, adding $5.2 billion annually to the national economy, including $2.8 billion to New South Wales, $1 billion to Queensland, but just $317 million to Victoria.
Melbourne is an iconic city, an iconic destination. Station Pier is a wonderful port.
A port that gives tourists their first taste of Melbourne as they step off the ship to explore the city. And that's why tourism experts say now more than ever, Station Pier is in desperate need of a facelift.
For us to really aggressively pursue that market and to be competitive, then we've got to think about the infrastructure that we're offering our visitors.
Sonia Marinelli, 7 News.
A psychologist paid for by Johnny Depp has testified that his ex-wife Amber Heard has 2 personality disorders. The doctor says it makes her angry, cruel and prone to dramatising the truth.
Ms. Heard did not have PTSD, and there were also pretty significant indications that she was grossly exaggerating symptoms of PTSD.
But the doctor admitted to being wined and dined at Depp's home in the lead-up to the trial. Generous 7 News viewers have dug deep to help a 3-year-old girl's fight against childhood dementia. They've helped Isla Hunter's family raise another $25,000 through their GoFundMe campaign over the past 24 hours. Isla suffers from the rare genetic disorder, one of only 2 Australians with the condition. Thanks to everyone. It's the news no one wants to hear, but interest rates could start to climb as soon as next week. Coming up on 7 News, the experts outline the options to limit the impact. Also ahead, new rules on painkillers. And graduation day for some of Victoria's very good dogs. Access to high-strength painkillers will be significantly wound back for patients after surgery. It's part of a crackdown on the over-prescription of opioids. Patients may be given paracetamol or ibuprofen unless they're in severe pain.
We're looking to find a better balance between providing good pain relief but avoiding harm for patients.
The new guidelines aim to reduce drug addiction and deaths in Australia. Looming interest rate rises could see thousands of Victorians struggle to repay their mortgages, but there's still time to save money by making a few tweaks before the banks do.
Mother of one, Kate Wilson, took out a mortgage just before the pandemic hit.
We've got a variable loan at the moment and just sort of sitting and waiting and watching.
A wait for an interest rate rise that might be just around the corner.
Now is sort of your last chance to act before rates go up.
Even a 1% lift in mortgage rates would see typical monthly repayments rise by $322. With some fixed loan rates recently tripling, what should we do right now?
Look, we think the boat has sailed for fixing.
But there are still good deals to be had for variable or split loans.
If your rate starts with a 3 or a 4, you are not being looked after. Bet against the banks and do some fixed and some variable.
Shop around, see if you could be on a better rate.
And another tip to get ahead of the game?
Why don't you pretend that the interest rates are 5%, even though you're only paying 2?
So the big question, when will the Reserve Bank start lifting those rates? Some are predicting the 3rd of May. Others say there'll be a super hike on the 7th of June. Especially now after today's inflation figures surged by the most in more than 20 years.
The race to curb inflation has started.
A race that has everyone watching their wallets.
It's a case of how high it goes and how high everything else goes.
Katrina Blowers, 7 News.
The rising inflation figures weren't all bad news, though, giving the Australian dollar a boost. Here's Network Finance editor Gemma Acton.
Well, Peter, it was a dismal day for Aussie shares, with the ASX 200 dropping 57 points to 7,261. Now, it could have been worse, with the higher than expected inflation numbers helping it to bounce back up off the day's lows. And that data also helped the Aussie dollar to edge higher. It's now buying 71.8 US cents, while gold has dropped back under 1,900 US dollars. And today on our local market, it was technology shares hit the hardest. They took their cue from Wall Street's technology index, called the Nasdaq, that fell nearly 4% overnight in its worst session since 2008. That was thanks to fears rising interest rates will crimp economic growth. Peter.
Gemma Acton reporting. Some of the country's most clever pups have officially graduated as seeing eye dogs. Nearly 50 dogs were paired with handlers over the past year, making it one of the most successful programs yet. Seeing eye dogs are trained to assist people with vision impairment. Among their duties, helping them to get onto trains and avoid obstacles. Well done to all. Sport is next with Tim Watson, and Tim, a footy champion, says don't tinker with tradition.
Mitch, the ruck injuries have put the bounce back in the spotlight as Scott Pendlebury starts a great debate. Also, Dustin steps up his return, but there are fresh concerns for Trent Cotchin. We're live next. The Hawks unveil their new skipper. One of the NBA's brightest young stars lights up the playoffs, and could this be the coolest dad in sport?
You're like, oh my goodness, he catch it.
Welcome back. Richmond has outlined a plan for Dustin Martin to return to the playing field. Let's head live now to Andrew McCormick at Punt Road. And Andrew, Dusty did his best today to tempt Damien Hardwick into an early recall.
Oh, Tim, they would have been tempted too, watching Dusty complete today's main training session, but his comeback is on hold for another week at least. He won't be on the plane to Perth to take on the Eagles on Friday night. He breezed through today's main session. You could barely know that he'd had the past month or 5 weeks off through personal leave. He had been training at least 3 times a week during that time off, so he's certainly fit, but just the match fitness was what concerned Richmond at this stage. So all eyes on a potential return against Collingwood next Saturday afternoon at the MCG. Wouldn't that be a blockbuster return? But this is the Tigers head of footy, Tim Livingston, explaining why Dusty won't be set for an early recall yet.
Well, it won't be this week. After a 5-week break, that's not the best prep going into this round, but we'll have a look at him again next week and see how he's progressing. The boys are excited to have him back training. He's got a couple of good football sessions in this week and is looking fit and strong.
Now, Trent Cotchin, the former captain, won't be on the trip to Perth this week either. He's rested off a 5-day break. He was showing off some of the Tigers' recent premiership success today, but didn't train, the Tigers say. He's just been rested, no injury worries. Along with Robbie Tarrant, he's too been rested off the back of a 5-day break. Those 2 outs offset by the likely return of co-captain Dylan Grimes and Kane Lambert, who both trained today. Tim?
Thanks, Macca, and love the glasses too. Magpies ruckman Brodie Grundy has avoided surgery, but his captain has caused a stir. Chief football reporter Tom Brown joins us now. And Tom, Scott Pendlebury has posed a very interesting question.
Tim, Pendlebury has posed the question, should we look at the centre bounce and change the rules? The catalyst, of course, Grundy and Pitney's PCL knee injuries on the weekend. There was confirmation from the Pies tonight that Grundy will miss about 12 weeks. At this stage, he won't need surgery, but they will need to review that with Julian Feller, his surgeon. He's currently in a knee brace for the best part now of 4 weeks. I spoke to Bulldogs great Luke Darcy this afternoon, who's not too alarmed at this stage based on one weekend, describing it as the gladiator part of the sport, the centre bounce.
I'd just be reluctant. The centre bounce, where the 2 biggest men on the field charge at each other as a battle of wills, is a pretty special part of our game. So we don't want players to get injured, but I wouldn't be making a move too quick.
Tim, another Pies superstar, Nick Dacos, copped an accidental stomp on his foot on Anzac Day. He is fine. The Pies had a light run this afternoon and the Star thankfully moved freely. Good news there. And Tim, I've been in touch directly with Paddy McCartan this afternoon, who did fail his concussion test on Monday, his 9th concussion. McCartan's told me he's all good and feels great. He'll miss at least the mandatory 12 days. But direct from McCartan, it is a positive sign tonight that hopefully it's not nearly as career-threatening as that concerning vision from the rooms Monday suggested.
Thanks, Tom. The Demons will have to get creative against the Hawks on Saturday, missing 3 premiership stars and their coach. Adam Uze becomes the 5th assistant to take charge of his team during a COVID year.
Taking the reins with Simon Goodwin in isolation, Adam Uze didn't expect the COVID curse would also wipe out 3 premiership stars. He does, though, have Jake Lever and Jack Viney to count on as they return from a positive test.
Jake's in a better position. He gets to have our main training session, but Jack's a competitive player and a real professional player, so he'll have no issues.
Hawthorn's next captain in waiting has been revealed, with James Sicily set to take charge for the next month.
James Sicily will captain the club for the first time and do so for the next 4 weeks, at which time we'll then reassess who we think is really good candidates.
The Saints arrived in Cairns ahead of Saturday's clash with Port. Paddy Ryder returning from his 2-game suspension.
He's a massive inclusion for us. He's a massive part of our group, and I know our midfielders get a lot of energy from him.
Zach Jones remained in Melbourne and will play VFL along with Jack Billings, who returns from a hamstring strain. AFLW superstar Erin Phillips has announced a blockbuster move to arch-rivals Port Adelaide after 3 flags at the Crows.
This is honestly a dream come true, to be able to say that I play for the Port Adelaide Football Club. It's something that I've wanted to do my whole life.
Her father Greg was a Port legend, playing 343 games for the club, winning 8 premierships. Chris Stubbs, 7 News.
Novak Djokovic is free to defend his Wimbledon title in June. The All England club confirmed COVID vaccination will not be mandatory, while doubling down on the contentious call to ban players from Russia and
we would
Belarus.
Risk their successful participation at Wimbledon being used to benefit the propaganda machine of the Russian regime, which we could not accept.
Djokovic has led a chorus of player outrage at the decision, labelling it crazy. Ja Morant's rise to NBA superstardom continues in the playoffs with a Dunk of the Year contender. But he wasn't done there, clinching a nail-biting win and a 3-2 series lead for Memphis over Minnesota.
Oh, it's good! 1 second left. Ja Morant with the bucket.
Miami defeated Atlanta 97-94 to advance to the second round after a 4-1 series win. This baseball fan could just about be the coolest dad in Cincinnati, catching a foul ball while taking care of his baby.
The bottle, no spillage, baby in perfect bliss, and a souvenir.
And he didn't even have to leave his seat, Mitch. That sure is multitasking at its finest.
I think it's child abuse, taking your child to the baseball.
I wouldn't go that far. No. What about that dunk from Morant?
Yeah, very impressive.
Yeah, one of the best you've ever seen?
Yes, it was. You're right there. And how about Erin Phillips in the Port Adelaide jumper?
Well, it was only a matter of time, wasn't it?
A lot of people will be happy about that. Thank you very much, Tim. Jane is next with the forecast. Jane, it's quite warm for late April, isn't it?
Rich, we are above average and warming further to end the week. Then it dramatically cools down. The roller coaster details are next.
Hello. Tonight on the latest from 7 News, inflation's up, interest rates are going to rise. What today's economic news means for the election, a leading economist tells us. New advice on daily aspirin to prevent heart attacks. Research now questioning that practice. And the most generous, wealthy Australian philanthropists revealed they're giving away the fortune. Hope you can join me tonight for the latest.
Hello again. There is more cloud to come tomorrow, but only a spit of light rain. Now we turn warm, humid and sunny to end the week. In Melbourne, it was grey for much of the day today before a pocket of sun late afternoon. Underneath that cloud, it certainly wasn't cold. Light northeasterly winds let it reach 22, still 21 out there now. That cloud is thickest in northern Victoria, but after the rain fell in the Mallee yesterday, it petered out and today just light and patchy. Sunny patches developed in the south of the state, and look at the difference in temperature. Not often that you see the warmer numbers south of the ranges. 23 in Bairnsdale, 17 in Bendigo. There has been a lot of rain in central and eastern Australia to our north, but this strong high that is here means Victoria only gets the leftovers. That high moves further east tomorrow, so our temperatures rise even more. But there are cold fronts crossing the Bight, so we are going on a roller coaster. The first front dissipates, but the second front is set to slow down and cross Victoria. It has a strong link to tropical moisture. Watch the cloud here connect us up to the Indian Ocean. So the first system continues. We've got light and patchy rain overnight and tomorrow. It'll clear from the west with sunshine returning. We'll end the week warm, humid and generally sunny. Then that slowing front with the tropical connection arrives. It'll affect Victoria from later Friday to Saturday afternoon. This is a good setup to get locally heavy thunderstorms and this band of slow-moving, soaking rain. This one brings widespread falls of 20 to 40 millimetres. Around the nation tomorrow, a still shower in Brisbane, Sydney and Canberra, but just a few millimetres. A burst of showers overnight in Hobart, but then generally dry tomorrow. Adelaide warm, lots of sunshine, top of 28. Perth, a burst of showers in the morning with the next front. To Victoria, large areas of cloud once again, but just patchy light rain underneath, mainly on and north of the ranges. That cloud slowly turns to sunshine from the west on a mild to warm day in moderate northerly winds. Closer in, grey once again. We've got the odd patch of very light rain, just a spit. Now that cloud will be breaking up to sunshine during the afternoon, and then it'll start to feel a bit muggy. The city is heading for 23, cloudy for much of the day before it turns to bright sunshine late in the afternoon. Now, we'll end the week with a very late in the season taste of Queensland. It'll be humid, it's warm and it's sunny on Friday, heading for a top of 25 degrees. Now, that will come to a dramatic end on Friday night as rain and thunderstorms develop during the evening. They continue in the early hours of Saturday, but It eases during the morning on Saturday, and by Saturday afternoon, actually quite a fair bit of sunshine, but only 18. 10 to 50 millimetres across the Melbourne area. Another burst of showers is due later next week. We are 23 tomorrow, cloudy for much of the day, before bright sunshine later, then humid, warm and sunny to end the week, Mitch.
Cloud connecting us to the Indian Ocean.
That's right. Did you see how it goes all the way up through there? So we're getting that tropical moisture to fuel this rain.
It's on the other side of the continent.
It is indeed. It can travel far.
Unbelievable. Thank you, Jane. Now, here's what's on Sunrise in the morning.
Thanks, Mitch. Tomorrow on Sunrise, who do you trust?
From brands to professions, Aussies have voted with a few surprises. The results are in. See you in the morning, Melbourne.
And that's the way it is this Wednesday, the 27th of April. Thanks for your company. For now, from the 7 News team, good night. What's that?